After takeoff and during cruise, the man stood up and walked to the flight attendant, handing her a little note. She took it, but initially she ignored it, as she assumed it to be a phone number or a personal note. However, he would lean in and whisper, "Miss, you'd better take a look at that note. I have a bomb." To further prove his point, and to her horror, he would open his suitcase where she would see the red stick and colorful wires and a battery. Calmly, he instructs her to relay this message to the cockpit, and what follows is one of the largest manhunts in US history. It's a rainy, overcast day at the Portland International Airport. To most of the people commuting through this airport, it was just another day of routine operation, but it would be anything but that. A middle-aged man wearing a black suit, white shirt, loafers, and sunglasses, despite the weather, would walk into the airport and purchase a one-way ticket to Seattle. The ticket for the Northwest Orient Flight 305 was bought in all cash with the name Dan Cooper, and the seat Dan would receive would be at the back of the Boeing 727 seat 18C. Not much happened until takeoff. Everything was routine for the staff and the passengers until shortly after takeoff, when the flight attendant named Florence Schaffner received a note. She would initially ignore it, but he would lean in and say, "Miss, you better take a look at that note. I have a bomb." The note in question had demands of 200,000 US dollars in cash, 4 parachutes, a refueling truck at the Seattle International Airport, and a warning to the cabin crew to follow his demands precisely. To further prove his point, he would open his briefcase to show what is supposedly thought to have been a bomb. More on that later. Once shown, the flight attendant would go into the cockpit and inform the pilots of the terrifying situation. Almost instantaneously, the pilots would contact the air traffic control. The FBI and Northwest Orient Airlines would also be notified. Roughly an hour later, the airplane would land in Seattle, where it would be met with pretty much all the demands of Cooper. The FBI believed that the safety of the passengers and crew was their utmost priority, so giving him the money and all of his demands would be the ideal situation. Furthermore, they would put a certain serial code on the $200,000 that will be given to him so they can track him back later. Cooper would end up trading all the passengers and the flight attendants for these items. And after this was over, it was only the main flight crew, which include the flight engineer and the pilots, were left in the aircraft alongside Cooper. With the fuel reserved, Cooper demanded that the aircraft be flown to Mexico City, but with a few unusual instructions. To understand the first request, it's important we look at the key feature of the Boeing 727 which made it very popular. The Boeing 727 was a short to medium range jet airliner introduced in the 1960s, known for its 3 rear-mounted engines and the T-tail design. Another standout feature, and something that's more relevant to this story, is the fact that it had built-in rear staircase, which was called air stairs, which allowed the boarding at airports without bridges. This was a revolutionary idea at the time. Airlines could access much more smaller airports through this jet. Cooper, for his first demand, wanted this bridge to be out during flight. Furthermore, the jet was to be flown at or below 10,000 feet, maintain a slow speed of 200 knots, and have the landing gear down with the flaps set to 15 degrees. The most ideal situation to jump out of a jetliner, to parachute out of a jetliner. As the airplane continues to cruise, all of the flight crew were instructed to stay near the cockpit or within the cockpit. whereas Cooper was the only one at the rear of the aircraft. A few hours into the long day, the cabin crew started to feel the effects of cabin depressurization. Suddenly, they got up and looked to the back of the aircraft, but there was no one left. He had vanished. The back door, the air stair, was left open, but there was nothing left. What followed was one of the most extensive searches in US history, with over 800 suspects and years of hunting revealing to absolutely nothing. The only thing left from Cooper was his black tie. Now, what happened to Cooper is unknown, but it is true that a man hijacked a plane, demanded ransom, and essentially got away with it. It is possible that when Cooper jumped, he did not survive, but there's no significant evidence of that. Only in 1980 was there another potential hope for the FBI, as an 8-year-old boy would find the $5,800 as he was digging in the Sandy riverbank in Vancouver. Over the years, there have been several hundred suspects regarding who exactly D.B. Cooper was, but there's 3 that I feel like stand out more than the regulars. Number 1. Richard McCoy Jr. was a Vietnam War veteran, Army helicopter pilot, and an experienced skydiver. He was known for his daring personality and had a history of criminal behavior, including bank robbery. In April 1972, just 5 months after the D.B. Cooper incident, McCoy pulled off a strikingly similar heist. He hijacked a United Airlines flight from Denver to San Francisco, demanded $500,000 as ransom, and parachuted out of the plane over Utah. He was later arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 45 years in prison. McCoy's hijacking bore a very uncanny similarity to Cooper's, including the use of a bomb threat, a parachute escape, and a demand for ransom money. Some investigators believe McCoy could have been Cooper, but the FBI ultimately ruled him out due to differences in physical description and alibi evidence. McCoy escaped prison in 1974 and was tragically killed in a shootout with law enforcement. Number 2. William Gossett. William was a former Army paratrooper and skydiving enthusiast who lived in the Pacific Northwest, where the crime had originally occurred. He was known for his expertise in parachuting and his experience skydiving with the region where Cooper likely landed. William came under suspicion because of his parachuting skills and his physical resemblance to the composite sketch of Cooper. Additionally, he had a history of financial troubles, which some speculated could have been the motivator in the hijacking. Gossett's background and skills made him a plausible candidate, but there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The FBI investigated him, but found no conclusive proof of his involvement. William died in 2003 without ever formally being charged or identified as D.B. Cooper. The last person I want to mention is William J. Smith, a former CIA operative and a mercenary with extensive experience in parachuting and aviation. Smith's background in covert operations and his expertise in parachuting led some researchers to consider him as a potential suspect. Additionally, his physical description and age at the time of the hijacking matched Cooper's profile. Smith's skills and background made him a compelling candidate. He could have had influence on the actual investigation, which eventually seemed to have failed to catch anybody. But unfortunately, there was no direct evidence linking him to the hijacking. The FBI did not formally investigate him, and Smith himself denied any involvement before his death in 2001. Outside of these 3, there are still hundreds of more suspects. However, every single one of them seems to always fall short. It seems that D.B. Cooper has become one of the few people in human history to essentially disappear off the face of the earth. Whether he will ever be identified is unknown. The only credible source of proof to find him is if forensic technology becomes advanced enough to test his tie. However, by then, he would most likely be dead. Or, who knows, maybe he is dead right now. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment of your thoughts of the situation, and I will have an even more exciting video waiting for you all next week.